Welcome to the NLP course on Rapport. Hope you've been enjoying the classes so far. I know that it's been great information, and we're now building on sensory acuity. So you should have just covered sensory acuity, being able to look outside yourself and see those subtle differences, those changes. And now we're going to get into how do you utilize that to establish rapport. Now, I was taking a lot of NLP trainings early on when I was a teenager. And for me, rapport is one of the most amazing techniques that came out of NLP to really establish that foundation of gaining some congruency inside yourself. As a teenager, I was going through what a lot of teenagers go through, and that's that awkward growth spurt. Some of your friends are taller, others aren't as tall. Some of your friends that you had in elementary school, you're not friends with anymore. A couple of them became extremely popular, other ones not as popular. And you remember when all of those things were so important, you know? How do I maintain that connection with a person? How do I get connections with new people? Because new friends were coming along. Interest in girls back then, obviously beginning to grow, and that thinking that comes along with that, and that desire for a relationship. And when I took the NLP training, I was about 11. And my first experience, as you guys have already heard, was with that fire walk. And then I went for that weekend training, and we learned a little bit about rapport there, a lot about rep systems and anchoring. When I went on to become a practitioner of NLP, rapport really taught me something very important, and that is that you are in charge of the results that you get in your communication with another person, and that people like people who are like themselves, and that this communication that you have comes out at a very unconscious level. Body language. You know, sometimes people say to me in the trainings, why do you respond to things the way that you normally do? I said, what do you mean? One lady said, well, a person will share their problem in the audience and they'll say, I have a phobia. Oh, love phobias. There we go, that response right there. And this lady goes, you talk like you love phobias, like they're so fantastic. And I said, here's the alternative. I sit there and I go like this. Ooh, you have a phobia? That's interesting. Now, what is my physiology saying? Well, it's communicating volumes. My words, listen to my words. Wow, you have a phobia? Interesting. Same words, different physiology. And when I learned this, I realized that my friends, my teachers, my parents were all communicating with more than just words. And it was so helpful in high school. And really, I became friends with almost everyone. I remember in my yearbook, one of my friends signed in my yearbook, Matt James, the person who was friends with everyone. I wonder how he did that, wink, wink, because he had done an NLP training and he had learned how to do that as well. And it totally transformed his life. I was out in the East Coast and I was in Pennsylvania. No, I'm sorry. I was up in Erie. And I was doing a training for a group of people, amazing businessmen, a couple of huge companies there, a couple of businesswomen there in the training as well, who also were running major corporations. And I remember getting that group together. First of all, being able to establish rapport with that group, because they all came in wanting to learn things, but they also came in with these preconceived ideas about what NLP was and what NLP wasn't. And the person that brought me in, the head of this group of organizations, he said that the week before I got there, that these people spent so much time researching how awful NLP was. He said, I fully expected, based on who these men and women were, that they were just going to absolutely come out with their guns a-blazing and completely tear apart everything you had to say. He said by the first segment, the first hour and a half, he goes, I don't know what you did, but the entire group was responding to you. He said the entire group was listening to what you had to say. They were following along, he said, with the exception of one person. And he said, when you came back from lunch, you got that one person. He goes, I paid attention after that because I've never seen anyone come in and get that group together on the same page. He took the skills that he learned with rapport. I was there for a 5-day training. He took rapport alone. He went down to Panama and opened up the ability to bring ships through the Panama Canal instantly. He worked with this politician utilizing NLP-based rapport techniques, and the guy absolutely, without a doubt, I had a person say to me, were bribes involved? No. No bribes, no exchange of money. And in fact, this politician's assistant wrote to the person who I trained and said, I don't know what you did. I've never seen him sign authorization forms this quickly. Usually you have to jump through some sort of hoop, and he signed it and wanted to make sure that it got back to you. This guy called me up and he said, NLP Rapport. He said the entire training was paid for just by opening up that route all the way through Panama. He said an NLP-based rapport is what made it valuable for him. The reason why, well, before I get into the reason why NLP rapport is so important, let me first explain what rapport is. Because we tend to have a little bit of an issue in the field of NLP of defining what rapport really is. So let's talk about rapport. Rapport is a technique for responsiveness, a technique for opening up communications. Rapport is a specific set of tools and techniques to create a responsiveness in another individual or with a group of people. Rapport is not about getting someone else to like you. That's a big misconception. I've heard a lot of people in NLP say rapport is about getting people to like you. And that's because they're confused with the saying that people tend to like people who are like themselves. Liking someone because they are like you doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be friends with them, that you're going to be influenced by them. What it means is that there's an openness. It opens up the channel of communication. Now, let's take a look from my psychology background. Specifically, when you have rapport with someone, they are more open and receptive to hearing what you have to say, getting the picture from what it is that you are sharing, from getting that overall experience of here's what I have and I'm willing to listen to you to see what would be a different way of viewing this possibly. What would be a different way of changing my life? What would be a different way of paying attention to things around me? When you don't have rapport with someone, what happens is you literally close that communication. NLP-based rapport is one of those things that has been studied. Wood 2006 looked at people who were using NLP-based rapport and people who were not using NLP-based rapport. And what he specifically found was that there is an openness and a responsiveness when you use specifically NLP-based rapport techniques. Well, having grown up with this stuff, I kind of knew he was going to find that result. However, how amazing that we have that type of research to validate this now. So why would rapport be so important? The reason why rapport would be so important is that it literally gives you a specific set of tools and techniques that opens up the channel of communication between you and another individual. If you're working with someone and you have rapport with them, you're able to go in there and share information and provide feedback. I've been managing since I was 18, and a lot of what I learned in the early days of NLP was applied directly to business. And when I would go in to share feedback with someone, to do an employee evaluation, I worked in human resources for a while. When you have rapport, the person is more apt to listen to what you have to say. They are more open to that communication. They get a better feel for what it is that you're saying. In relationships, when you have rapport with your family, with your friends, with your partner, you have that ability to open up that channel of communication and overcome obstacles. My wife and I have been together now for 10 years as I'm filming this, and known each other since 1993. And we encounter bumps in the road like everyone else does. We have a boy who's about to become a teenager, and in fact, today we had a specific discussion about him. And to know that the two of us were on the same page, that we had that level of communication and openness, even though I'm seeing the issue in one way, she's seeing it another way, we were able to come together and figure out what do we need to do to assist him in growing and evolving on his path. Without rapport, you're just bumping up against people. This is my point of view. Well, this is my point of view. Conflict. Yeah? With rapport, it opens up the channel of communication. What about in your own health and fitness? Getting healthy and fit in your own body. Milton Erickson, who these techniques were specifically modeled after, said patients are patients because they are out of rapport with their unconscious mind. Think about that for a second. When you lose rapport with your unconscious mind, when you lose that rapport inside, what does that do? What does that say? Imagine what that means when you have a rapport inside. That ability to wake up and say, you know what, today I need to exercise, and your body responds. Your behaviors reflect your thoughts. That only comes from having rapport. So the reason why rapport is so important is that it opens up the communication internally and externally with others. By having that communication, you have a responsiveness that isn't just known in NLP, it's absolutely validated through the research that's out there. Okay, so let's get into what rapport is. Now, I'm looking down here at the manual. Hopefully you have a page in your manual that says rapport. Take that out and go ahead and take a look at it now. And it says right here that communication is much more than the words that we speak. It is both verbal and nonverbal. At any given time, we are communicating more than what we are just saying. In fact, the nonverbal communication is far more meaningful than the words. And here's a study that's cited, 7%, 38%, 55. 7% being words, 38% tonality, 55% physiology. Now I have to tell you, if you've done any Google searches on this, you're going to find some websites that absolutely say this study was done and it was based on incongruent communication. They were looking for it to be mostly physiology. And guess what? I agree with that. Watch carefully now. Are you ready? The train's going to arrive at 10:30. I bet you picked up right away with the sensory acuity that you just learned that my physiology was expressing something opposite than the words that I was saying. Now watch this. The train's going to arrive at 10:30. How congruent was that? It spoke volumes, and yet you were able to focus in on the words. We most notice, listen carefully now, we most notice the 55% being physiology when there is an incongruency between the words and the physiology. But here's the deal. When there's no incongruency, when your physiology is backing up the words, we tend to consciously focus in on the words themselves. What this tells me here, and most follow-up studies have found, and in fact in the research that I've done, and in the psychology textbooks that I looked at in my degree program, that physiology is usually in that 50 to 60% range. That tonality is usually in that 25 to 30% range, and words are usually in that 7, 10, highest I've ever seen it is 20%. The highest I've ever seen is 20% words, 30 tonal, and 50% physiology. So what this means is that the bulk of what we are communicating to another person isn't coming from the words, isn't coming from the tonality, it's coming from the physiology. The second biggest portion of our communication is from the tonality, and the smallest amount that we are communicating is the words. Now let me give you a real-world example of this. Email. I remember when email first came out, and this is back in the 90s, and this lady that I was working with, phenomenal woman, great businesswoman, lives down in Australia, extremely successful. She sends me this email, and I'm reading it. I'm on my computer, I'm reading it, and I'm like, why is she so pissed off? Why is she like... And I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, what's going on? I thought everything was fine. And she goes, everything is fine. And I went, yeah, but you sent me this email. And she said, yeah, I was really excited when I was writing the email. And I went back and read it with an excited, happy tone, and I read the email in a completely different way. Come on, how many of you have ever read an email and put a different tone on it and gotten an entirely different response? Nicholas, our other trainer whom you've already seen in the presentations, pointed out that's why they created those little, icons or emoji that they put on the iPhones. You can put a smiley face on it so people get the point. Hey, look, physiology. Then you can hallucinate a positive tone on that. We crave for tonality. We crave for physiology. The reason why this information is so important is that the bulk of our communication is coming from physiology and tonality. And in studies of psychology, your tone and your physiology are a function of unconscious behavior. That means that the bulk of your communication is in the control of, it is directed by your unconscious mind. So when you see someone say, oh, I really like that, they don't know that they're making that facial expression. They don't know that they have that physiology. You, as a gifted practitioner of NLP, are able to see that with your sensory acuity and immediately pinpoint there's an incongruency here. Now, how can we begin to use this? I'll get to that in a moment. What I want to do is I want to finish up a little bit of the things that fall under these categories here. Rapport is established by matching and mirroring. Matching is very simple. If you would please go ahead and raise your right hand. And as I raise my right hand, I am now matching you. This is matching. So you there with your right hand raised, even if I turn like this, I'm still matching you. Now if you keep your right hand up and I do this, I'm now mirroring you. So NLP uses the term matching and mirroring. That is matching and or mirroring another person's physiology so that you can establish rapport. Because remember, people like people who are like themselves. So if you match and mirror the bulk of where communication is, that is the physiology, you are then able to establish a level of rapport because at the unconscious level, the person is sitting there going, wow, this individual is a lot like me. Now, here's the funny thing. Usually at this point during the training, I tell everyone, okay, everyone freeze. And I'll walk out into a group with 5, 10, 15, 200 people in the room. And I'll begin to pinpoint where we naturally match and mirror each other. And literally by this time in the presentation, people unconsciously are matching and mirroring each other. Next time you're out with another person, next time you're meeting an individual, or if you're around someone you already have a great deal of rapport with, notice that you sit in a similar way. That would be the posture under the 55% there. Notice that you have similar gestures. Think of facial expressions, blinking, breathing. These are all things that you can match and mirror with physiology. That falls under the physiology component. Tonality. If you take a look at the slide that we have up now, tonality, tone, pitch, tempo, that's speed, timbre, that's quality, volume is loudness. So under tonality, you have these 4 different aspects. And then under the words themselves, you also have matching predicates, keywords, common experiences, and content chunks. So the basis of rapport right here is that when people are like each other, they tend to like each other. The NLP process of rapport isn't about getting someone to like you, it's about responsiveness. So the way it is done is it is done through matching and mirroring. So let's talk specifically about how to match and mirror. How to match and mirror is very simple. First of all, my best recommendation is that you do this in a way that's comfortable. If you're not able to cross your legs with your leg all the way over, don't do it. If that's not comfortable for you. When I sit down and I'm first meeting someone and I'm having a business meeting with them, what I'll do is I'll cross my legs if they're crossing their legs in a way that's comfortable for me. The next thing is that you want to avoid mimicking. Kids learn how to match and mirror at a very early age. My daughter's in kindergarten now, and she was in preschool a couple years ago. And I remember going to her preschool and I'm watching her out on the playground. And a kid's doing one thing and she starts doing the exact same thing. And I'm watching going, she's learning matching and mirroring. And she came home and we're sitting at the dinner table and I go to pick up the fork and she picks up the fork right along the time that I do it. And I totally see that. And I go like this and I itch my face and she goes, and she itches her face. Biggest mistake that I see people making when they first learn matching and mirroring is they think that they need to do it right away when the person is actually making that physiological movement. That's not the way it works. Here's the key, and if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. You need to match and mirror outside of the conscious awareness of the individual. So in other words, let's say you right now crossed your arms. Well, I wouldn't immediately go like this, I would wait. And while you're talking, I might sit back in my chair and cross my arms and match and mirror you. If you then moved your arms, I wouldn't go and do it right along with you, I would wait. If your arms then moved, I would just gently, in a very comfortable way, undo my arms and put my arms by the side. So in other words, you want to do it in a way where you are pacing the other person's experience. In NLP terms, it's called pacing and leading. Pacing is where you're looking at the client and you are pacing their experience by matching and mirroring their physiology, their tone. With tone, pitch, speed, loudness, those are really good. Pitch and quality though, by the way, if a person speaks at a very high pitch or their quality of voice is such a way that you cannot do it without it becoming mimicking, then don't do it. I was working with a lady who had a very high-pitched tone of voice. I didn't match that. However, she talked very slow, very methodically, with a lot of conscious intention. And so I slowed down my speed. I lowered my voice a little bit, but I still talked in my pitch and my quality. So please make sure that you respect the fact that other people talk in a different way. Match and mirror what you can and be comfortable with it. Gestures, going back to gestures, hand movements. I had a person that I worked with in a training came up on stage for one of the demos, and I said to the person, so why is it you came up here on the demo? And he said, I really want to be able to let go of this incongruence that I have. And while he was doing this, I didn't sit there going, that would be mimicking. That would be inside the conscious awareness, and the person would sit there and go, what are you doing? It's not as comfortable for me to move my hands that rapidly like he was doing. So what did I do? When he was done talking, I said, well, I'm so glad that you came up here on stage. That's fantastic. I'm so grateful for you coming up here. Smaller gestures, more comfortable for me. He didn't even notice. Outside of his awareness, by the end of the process that we did, demos that you will be seeing during this training, you're going to see that the client has a positive, amazing experience. And that is in large part because of this foundation of rapport. With predicates, key words, there was a person that called me up on the phone, because by the way, you can do rapport and matching and mirroring over the phone. This person calls me up on the phone and they said, look, I've called these other NLP training companies and I want to know, what do you have to offer? Because listen. This is really important for me. And then he described something that was so important, something that he wanted to achieve in his own personal life, an improvement in his relationship. He said, I'm really coming here to learn about relationships. So I explained to him about relationships. And he goes, now listen. Am I going to be able to do this without my partner being there? Because she's not going to be able to come. And I said, of course. And I said, now here are some other things that you're going to get with this training. And he goes, okay, now listen. And I went, okay, well, that's 3 times. Listen. I didn't do it right away. And towards the end of the conversation, I said, let me tell you about this upcoming training specifically. So listen. This is really important. And there was silence. And he goes, I'm so glad I talked to you. Finally, someone has listened to me. And I said, cool. He goes, am I going to learn what you just did? I said, you bet, on day 1. We get right into rapport immediately, because when you open up that channel of communication, positive things occur. I had a person one time say to me, what if you get into this rapport with someone and, like with a waitress. One of my students went out to dinner that night, match and mirrored a waitress, and the waitress bought him a free piece of pie. He said, is that fair? Is that ecological? Is it ethical? I got free pie just from matching and mirroring. And I said, did you leave a larger tip? And he went, yeah, you bet. I said, so there was a good exchange of energy. And besides, she was the manager, so she had authority to give you that free piece of pie. I said, only positiveness comes from matching and mirroring. When you open up that responsiveness, that openness, well, what they found in the study by Wood 2006 is that the people that practiced NLP-based rapport in a sales setting got a positive response from the person that they were talking with, regardless of whether or not the person actually purchased the product. So in other words, I practice rapport, the person is happy whether or not they made the purchase. This other trainer, this other person, this other group that didn't practice the NLP-based rapport didn't get the same positive response. In fact, they got more negative feedback. They were seen as being pushy, not open. There's the key. Not open. No movement, no line of communication. So NLP-based rapport absolutely helps you with that. The other things that you can match and mirror from a words perspective is predicates, keywords, common experiences, and content chunks. So big picture here. Let's go back now. Big picture. NLP-based rapport. What you're doing is you are opening up the channel of communication through responsiveness, and you establish that open line of communication by matching and mirroring. So how you establish rapport is through matching and mirroring. If a person sits down next to you, you slowly, comfortably, in a way that works for you, begin to match and mirror their posture, their gestures, their facial expression, their blinking, their breathing. And you might be sitting there going, well, what about the tonality? As they begin to talk, listen to their pitch, their speed, their quality, their volume. And what you do is you do your best to match and mirror that. How about the predicates, keywords, common experiences, content chunk, all of those, all the way down to that initial handshake. You ever walked out and gone to shake hands with someone and the hand is like a wet noodle and you're expecting something firm? Almost an instant rapport breaker. Or what about that person that reaches out and tries to squeeze your hand off? They want to give you the bodybuilder handshake. Could be almost an instant rapport breaker. When you reach out and you shake the hand, you squeeze and match and mirror that. That's almost an instant rapport builder when working with someone. So how do you do this? Again, outside of the conscious awareness of the individual, you match and mirror these things that are here on the page that's labeled rapport. Posture, gestures, facial expression, blinking, breathing, tone, tempo, timbre, volume, predicates, keywords, common experiences, and content chunks outside of the awareness of the individual. It takes practice. It takes practice doing this with a person one-on-one. It takes practice doing this with your friends and family. Begin with them because, that's what friends and family are for. Guinea pigging NLP techniques. It's a joke, just in case your sensory acuity hadn't fully kicked in yet. In all seriousness, though, I went home. I did matching and mirroring with my stepmother, with my father, with my brother. I was only 13. I started matching and mirroring my friends, and guess what? Until it became mimicking, no one even knew. No one had a clue. I one time had a person come over to the office, and this is just in case you're going, well, what if someone does catch you? What if they catch you matching and mirroring? Probably only other NLP people are going to do that. I was in the office when we were back in Honolulu, and a couple came in to see me, and they walked in the door and they start talking to me. And one of them standing across the hall, the other one standing next to me, and all of a sudden he goes like this, "Oh, look how good he is. He's crossing his legs like how you are, and he's nodding while I'm talking just like I'm doing. God, Matt, you're matching her with your lower half and you're matching me with the upper half." And then she looks across at me and she goes, "Stop matching and mirroring me." And I went, okay. So in other words, stop attempting to open up the communication. Don't match and mirror me. And she goes, "Yeah, don't." I said, "Wait, you just match and mirrored me." She said, "You stop doing that." I said, "Okay, you stop." "Wait, I'm doing it." "Oh my God." We started laughing. And I said, "Look, here's the deal. I wasn't doing it consciously. It's become an unconscious behavior at this point. I've been doing this now for 30 years. What if someone catches you? Well, then stop doing it that obviously and learn how to tone it back a notch. If while you're doing it, you're not getting the response that you want, then what you do is increase what you are matching and mirroring. Bring it up. You got to find that middle ground there. That middle ground of if you go too far, it's mimicking, but if you don't do enough, you don't have rapport. You got to find that balance there in the middle and allow it to become an unconscious process. So that's what matching and mirroring is. That's how you do it. Now, let's tackle a couple of other big picture questions that we have here. What if you're working with someone and you want to be able to match and mirror something that you're unable to see? Well, in that case, what you want to do is you want to do what's called crossover matching and mirroring. So if I'm working with someone and their foot is tapping, but they can't see my feet, well, I could tap my finger on my arm like this, ever so gently. And those things will allow you to then connect up what they are doing with their feet and what you are doing with your fingers. Now, the way you know you have rapport, so a lot of people ask, well, how am I going to know if I have rapport or not? What if I'm doing it? What's going to allow me to know? What are those indicators of rapport? Well, in fact, if you look at the next page in your manual, the 4 indicators of rapport. There's a kinesthetic, there's an auditory, a visual, and an auditory digital. So the kinesthetic one is you get that warm, fuzzy feeling. So what if you're working with someone and you're doing matching and mirroring and you feel really good and they have a warm fuzzy and they say it feels really good to talk to you? Well, that's one of the indicators right now. Another one might be a visual. So you're working with the person. Let's say I bring someone up on stage with me and all of a sudden I see a color shift as I'm talking to them. It's as if they're responding to my words. Using your sensory acuity, you can pick up those color shifts. That's the visual. Auditory. The person may say something. They may say, "Oh, it's so great talking to you. I feel like you really listen to me. I really am open to the ideas that you're sharing. I'd love to hear more." Well, that would be an auditory. So that would be as if you knew the person before. That kind of auditory response. That's the other indicator. And then finally, auditory digital. It's called leading. And a lot of NLP talks about pacing and leading. If I start matching and mirroring a person, and then I go and make a movement, and they then move after I move, that means I started off pacing them, now I'm leading them. That means that you have established firm and deep rapport. You have established that level of rapport, that open communication is there, and you now have that responsiveness. Those indicators will allow you to know, as an individual, you have established that level of rapport. So when I taught this person that rapport in the training that I did out there in Erie, he goes, I only learned it. You did a 30-minute presentation on rapport. That's all I got to know. And I go all the way down there to Panama. I have a translator. This person is having to help me translate. And as I'm talking to this person, just outside of their awareness, as they were crossing their arms, he goes, I would sit there and cross my arms. When he would breathe in to say something, I would breathe in. He goes, I noticed that when he talked, he did a lot of nodding, and every once in a while he would go like this. And he said, while I was talking to this person, every once in a while I would go like this. And he said, and all of a sudden I saw this color shift, like he was responding to what I had to say. And he said, sure enough. He goes, it saved the company close to $250,000 of going down there repeatedly, of having to hire other people. He goes, I went down there. He goes, all I did was matching and mirroring. And within 5 minutes, this guy is talking to me about his family, about his friends, about how amazing Panama is. He said, truly, in a short presentation, just practicing these very simple techniques of matching and mirroring, he was able to establish this in a business setting instantaneously and get a specific result that literally affected his bottom line. So, practice your rapport. Practice it with people you know, practice it with people that you don't know, and get really good at it, because it is a massive part, a huge foundation in NLP. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to seeing you in another one. Thank you so much for taking the next step to learn more about NLP and how it will empower your life. I'm here at one of our events in Newport Beach, California, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and click on one of those orange buttons below so that you can sign up for our practitioner training that's nearest you. Remember now, space is limited. We limit the group size, so please do take advantage of this opportunity now. I'm going to be there with you live, experiencing the entire event, and so again, while you're thinking about it, go ahead and click on one of those buttons, and I look forward to meeting you there. Take care. Aloha.